Hello folks, Alex here. This is Alex Unabridged, and this is the I Know What You Read Last Summer tag. So welcome back to the channel if that is the case. I've got a tag for you today. This one is the I Know What You Read Last Summer tag. I've seen this on a few people's channels and I really like this one. I first saw it on Olly's channel, Olly, and also on Crystal's channel, Fiber Artsy. And Crystal kind of threw open the tag to anyone. She didn't tag anyone specifically, she just said, consider yourselves tagged if you want to do it. So I shall. I consider myself tagged. This was originally created in Spanish, I believe, and translated by Goddess of Gore. I will link to all the relevant videos down below in the description. So let's crack on straight with the prompts then. Prompt number 1, Final Girl, a book with a strong female protagonist. Well, it's not often that I can get through a tag without one of my responses being my favourite book of all time so far. And so I will use that straight off and get it out of the way. And that is, of course, The Passage, in fact, The Passage trilogy by Justin Cronin. One of the things I love about Cronin's writing in this trilogy is the character work. And in the character of Amy, the girl from nowhere, as she's kind of called to start with, I think he created a really interesting and strong female character. Strong in vulnerability, as well as like just real strength, emotional strength, psychological strength, and inevitably physical strength. And she's not the only one, I have to say, in that trilogy. There are some fantastic female characters. Alicia Lish is kind of a really strong female character in a very kind of outwardly strong way. Headstrong, physically strong, agile, mentally very strong. Sometimes a little bit closed off. But you know, part of the story, part of her character arc is about her kind of sort of dealing with, you know, how she manages her emotion and her kind of place in the world. But amongst the ensemble, because it is really, can I just say, an ensemble kind of cast of characters going on a quest in the first one, there are some great female characters. So yes, so The Passage, the trilogy really, but certainly the first book by Justin Cronin. Okay, prompt number 2, Popcorn, a book you couldn't put down or stop reading. There's been quite a few, but the one that comes to mind as a most recent read is The Meg by Steve Alton. And I've mentioned this on the channel before when I reviewed The Meg, or, you know, kind of gave my thoughts on The Meg. I couldn't stop reading it, but not because it was like amazing. Far from it. It's great. It's a great book, but it is pure trash. But I couldn't stop reading it because I needed to keep going to see exactly how much more ridiculousness was to come. It got to the point where I was, you know, it was 2 a.m. and I really should have gone to bed, but I couldn't. I had to keep reading to see exactly how utterly ridiculous it was going to get in the end. And it got to supreme levels of ridiculousness. So yes, so The Meg, yeah, couldn't put that down because it was just so crazy. Okay, prompt number 3, Ticket. Name the book that introduced you to your favourite genre. Well, my favourite genre is horror, and the book that kind of kicked off that love of horror was The Shining by Stephen King. As a kid, I had hated horror. I'm a scaredy cat. I still am a scaredy cat, especially when it comes to movies and TV. So I had always shied away from anything horror, thinking that I couldn't handle it. And then when I was about 16, I decided to give Stephen King a go because some of my mates at school had read some and said how great it was. And so I picked The Shining. I thought that one sounded interesting, and I picked The Shining, and I took it on holiday with me to read in a hotel in the mountains. And absolutely fell in love with it, and fell in love with King's writing. And that, to start with, that was kind of a gateway to get me into Stephen King, but inevitably it led from King to other horror writers and into a love of horror in general. So yeah, The Shining was my first foray into the world of horror. So prompt number 4, this is in 3 parts. This is outdoor cinema. So the first part is name a book that has the best book to film adaptation. I wouldn't say the best, but I would say for me one of my favourites is A Scanner Darkly by Philip K. Dick, and the film adaptation is by Richard Linklater, and stars Keanu Reeves and Woody Harrelson and Robert Downey Jr., Winona Ryder. There's quite a lot of faces in it. But this, for me, is one of my favourites because this is one where it really helped my kind of understanding of, my kind of processing of the book, in terms of the concepts. Because this is, the film itself, if you don't know it, is rotoscoped, which is, it's filmed in live action and it's animated over the top of it. So you get some really trippy kind of visual sequences. And, it's like a lot of Dick's work, it's about drugs and drug use. And it really helped with that kind of my own visualization, kind of to get my head straight on what I'd read in the book, but also concepts like the scramble suit, to have a visual representation of that from someone else really helped me kind of get my head around what this thing was, and kind of some of the kind of, I suppose, philosophy and that kind of thing behind it, the thinking, it just helped me access the material of the book better. And it's an enjoyable film. I do really like the film. So I wouldn't say it was the best, but for me, it's one of my absolute favourites because of the fact that it really enhanced my kind of reading of the book, if you like. So part 2 of the outdoor cinema prompt then is a film that has a better sequel than the original. This one was quite an easy one for me, and this one is The Dark Knight, the second in the Chris Nolan Batman trilogy. I love Batman. Batman, I think, is probably my favourite comic book character. And, I'll watch pretty much any film to do with Batman. But the Chris Nolan ones that's my Batman. I don't know whether anything will ever top those. And I watched Batman Begins, and I really enjoyed it. I really liked it. But it just can't hold a candle to The Dark Knight for me. And I think, even though The Dark Knight Rises is cracking as well, it's The Dark Knight that, out of those 3, that one is just, for me, so far and above the others. Possibly because of the performances. Heath Ledger, I think, did an amazing job with Joker. But yeah, it was so much more engaging, so much more exciting than Batman Begins, which was not a bad movie at all. But yeah, The Dark Knight, absolutely love that. It's one of my favourite films, Batman or otherwise. And the third part of the prompt is name a scary movie that you recommend. As I've already said, me and scary movies don't generally get on very well. But I do like tense movies. I do like tension. I like that kind of, I like the tension of the unseen. So, because it's the visuals with horror movies that I struggle with. If the visuals are too scary, they get stuck in my head and they won't go away, and that's me done for a while in terms of, nightmareless sleep. So yeah, I like stuff that makes me feel tense, that gives me that suspense kind of element to it, and the kind of a feeling of sort of an ominous sort of tone and an ominous feeling. I'll give you a couple. One, I think, which is a masterclass in tension and suspense, which is Alien. But if you haven't seen Alien yet, go watch it. The other one, a more modern one, is A Quiet Place. I really, really liked that film a lot. I've seen it several times, and I still think it's a great film in terms of what it does with that whole level of tension, and the fact that you can't make a noise, that the threat in it, the monsters in it, are drawn by any noise. And as humans, we make noises all the time. And the fact that this centers on it's a family. You've only got your basically your four characters essentially, and they can communicate through sign language because their daughter is deaf. So it's a family drama at the same time as it being kind of a thriller horror sort of suspense movie. And I just think it's really well done. It's one of those that's, I think it's, it kept my attention throughout. It's the right sort of length, it's the right pace, the performances are really good. And yeah, I really, really like A Quiet Place. Okay, prompt number 5 then. The movie. A movie that you are too scared to watch. Wow, there's so many. So yeah, most horror movies. So all movies about possession, generally, sharks, hauntings, some body horror stuff. I love body horror in fiction, but not in movies. Things like things that used to scare me as a kid, in terms of like even just the video box art used to scare me. So stuff like Nightmare on Elm Street, Hellraiser, stuff like that from the 80s. I'm too scared to watch that. I used to watch quite a lot of disturbing stuff in my 20s, more art housey type stuff. And I don't really have the desire to watch that kind of stuff these days. I'm not too scared to watch it, but I just don't have the desire to watch it. I would be very wary of watching anything made by Gaspar Noé. After watching Irreversible in my 20s, which is a very interesting film, but yeah, there's a price to pay for that film. That hit me. That hit me hard, that film. I think the one film that I can think of, which I just have no desire to watch at all, and I don't even like it being in my brain, because it just makes me even the idea of it makes me feel a bit sick, and that is The Human Centipede. Just no, just absolute no, big bag of nope. Anything like that which is kind of getting into that kind of extreme body stuff, gross, really grotesque stuff, just no, that I'm way too, that would stick in my head way too much. It would not be a good idea. So yeah, I think that's probably the one that I am not, as I say, not too scared to watch. I'm just no. Absolutely not. Okay, moving on to nicer things. Prompt number 6, Summer Loving, a book recommendation for the summer. Fiction-wise, I would say something big, a nice big chonker. Something like It. Stephen King, I think, is great for the summer because you can really get your teeth into some of the big stuff. It I read one summer, it just kind of, it is, for me, that's one of the perfect summer fiction books. It's a group of kids in their own kind of vacation time, spending each day outside together, but kind of fighting this evil. It's coming of age. It's It's got so much to it that's it doesn't not feel summery, but it just feels like a summer book to me. That. Or if you want something non-fictiony, I would go for something outdoorsy, something probably with snow. There's something my wife and I have found that, like, if we get really hot in the summer, we tend to watch like extreme snow sports documentaries and films, because something about watching the snow and watching people be that cold makes us cooler. Don't know why, but that's what happens. And I can say the same can be said for some books. If I'm reading about snow and ice, then it does something in my head and it makes me feel a bit cooler. So the one I'll recommend is Eiger Dreams, Ventures Amongst Men and Mountains by John Krakauer. And this is kind of a collection of stories, essays, etc. by John Krakauer about various different extreme kind of adventures, if you like, in various different places in the world. So I'll read you a bit of the description. In Pakistan, the fearsome K2 kills 13 of the world's most experienced mountain climbers in one horrific summer. In Valdez, Alaska, 2 men scale a frozen waterfall over a 400-foot drop. In France, a hip international crowd of rock climbers, bungee jumpers and paragliders figure out new ways to risk their lives on the towering peaks of Mont Blanc. Why do they do it? How do they do it? In this extraordinary book, Krakauer presents an unusual fraternity of daredevils, athletes and misfits, stretching the limits of the possible. So this is a good one because you can kind of pick it up and put it down, read a chapter, read a story essentially. And it is great sort of adventure non-fiction stuff. Okay then, prompt number 7, Scythe Assassin, a villain you'd love to interview. This was quite a difficult one actually, because a lot of the stuff that I read is not really, it's not human villains. It's often supernatural or animals. I do like my animal attack books. So this was quite tricky. But the one that comes to mind first and foremost in terms of a human villain would be Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. So a dual interview, if you like. Because I find that story quite fascinating in terms of what Jekyll does, why and how he ends up with this kind of second personality of Mr. Hyde. But it's a very short book, and I would like to interview him because I'd just like more information. I would like to get into the real nitty gritty of the psychology of what Jekyll was trying to do, and his own thoughts on the mind and morality and all that kind of stuff. I think it'd be a fascinating character to interview. Okay, prompt number 8, The Group of Friends, a book with the worst friend group. I racked my brains to come up with one that was different from Crystal's, but I couldn't, because this is just the worst friendship group that I've ever read, and that is From the Ruins by Scott Smith. That group of people, there isn't, for me, there is no redeeming features at all. I didn't care about any of them, and they all get their, they get their dues. That it's I really didn't care about them because they were just so. They were infuriating. They for me, they didn't really act believably. I just couldn't stand the lot of them. Really didn't care when they died. So prompt number 9 then is End of Course, Your Last DNF. This one is a recent one from my Garb August reading, and it was a category romance from a couple of weeks ago, and that is Nothing Special by A.E. Vere. which is a category romance set in a police department. It's a gay romance. And it was an audiobook, so I got further into it than I would have done if I'd have been reading the text version, just because the audio narration made it quite hilarious. It's not meant to be hilarious, but it was. But it's kind of, there's only so much of that you can kind of deal with, and I was trying to see it through to the end, but then a slur was used, a transphobic slur was used, not by a villain, but by one of the characters we're meant to like, one of our main characters, and it was used in a very throwaway kind of manner, and it was just the point at which I kind of went, no, I'm done. It was the last straw, really. So I DNF'd probably about 3/4 of the way in, actually. Okay, prompt number 10. Summer Party, the book with the worst party in it. I don't know whether I've read many party scenes in books before anyway, but certainly this one is a bad party, and that is the dinner party in Jaws. It's a very awkward dinner party anyway, because of the people that are invited by Brody's wife, and the fact that she spends the time, the whole evening flirting with Hooper in front of Brody, and you've got some particularly kind of just dialogue that hasn't aged well, things like that. It's quite a boring scene as well, and it goes on too long. So it's the worst party in terms of, if you were there at the party, it wouldn't have been a good party, but also the worst party in terms of it's just quite a dull scene, and I've just spent most of it kind of going, shark, where's my shark? So yes, Jaws. Okay, prompt number 11, we have a secret, a character that talks too much. I couldn't think of one who's kind of a loose-lipped character who kind of, says stuff that they shouldn't in terms of giving secrets away. But I could come up with one who I just wanted to just constantly yell, "Oh my goodness, shut up." And that is Lex from Jurassic Park by Michael Crichton. That kid, man, how did she not get eaten? How did she not get eaten by a dinosaur? How did they not throw her to the dinosaurs? Everything she says is either whinging or a snide comment, or, just being a brat. She's just a complete brat in that. And I did just want to go, oh my gosh, Lex, shut up. So yes, Lex from Jurassic Park. Prompt number 12 then, Cabin in the Woods, the best setting for a book. I am rather partial to a bit of post-apocalyptic or apocalyptic kind of America as a setting. So I love The Stand, The Passage, Monstrous, which is a gay post-apocalyptic monster romance series. I Am Legend, Z for Zachariah. There's a lot of some of the books that I really like are that setting. It is an immediate, if I read that in a description, I will give something a go. So that's one definitely that I really enjoyed. But recently, I'm very drawn to deep sea. I find it quite intriguing. I'm getting into my shark books, despite the fact I have a terrible phobia of sharks. In terms of visuals, I'm enjoying being able to access some of that through books where I don't have to worry about the visual element of it. At least my brain senses that. So I've enjoyed Jaws. I've enjoyed The Meg. I've got other sharky things kind of on the go for Garb August. I've got other things on my list for future reading, which is all sharky. I enjoy, Orca and Pestilence, which is killer lampreys, and anything that's kind of deep water, certainly deep sea. I'm very intrigued by, and I really enjoyed Our Wives Under the Sea by Julia Armfield, which is very deep sea, in terms of kind of really deep sea trenches. going down in submersibles, and weird stuff that happens down there for one of the characters. Yeah, it's what, because it's one of those areas that we know so little about, you know, like really deep, super deep sea. There's a lot I think you can do with that in fiction. I think it's like space, isn't it? It's like there's so much we don't know that you can be really speculative about it and do some really interesting stuff with it. So I'm kind of definitely going to look out some more stuff about deep sea weirdness and deep sea horror and stuff like that. Okay, final prompt then is prompt number 13, Friday the 13th, a book that traumatized you. Do you know what? I don't think I've ever read a book that traumatized me. I've seen plenty of films that have. But no, never a book. I think the one that's, instead of traumatized, I would say the one that's kind of really stuck with me, that really got in my head from recently, is Things Have Gotten Worse Since We Last Spoke by Eric LaRocca. It's a short story, essentially a novella, really. And I think it's the way he writes and the way the story's structured and just how it kind of ramps up and it keeps kind of getting worse and worse. And it's kind of the minds of the characters and the actions that play out. There's something about that story that really just got in my head. And it won't go away. And it's one reason why I now really want to, read some more Eric LaRocca. I've got a ton on my list when I have time to get to it. But I do, he really intrigues me in how he writes. But yeah, that one, it's stuck in my head for whatever reason. It's not a perfect story, but it's definitely got its claws in. So yes, I will use that instead of, not traumatized, but it's definitely stuck in my head, and it's dark. It's definitely a dark one in there. But I kind of like that, dark stuff that makes you think. That's all good. So those are all the prompts then. So only thing left for me to do is to tag some folks. I will tag some folks this time. A few folks that I think could provide some interesting answers and recommendations through this. And those people are Nick from Another Booktube channel, Kelsey at Slime and Slashers, and Andrew at It Came From The Page. If any of you fancy a crack at this one, do give it a go. So that is it from me today then. Thank you very much for watching, folks. If you enjoyed this video, please do consider giving me a like and subscribing for more content coming very soon. But from me, for now, that's ta-ra.